want to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. My name is Fred Litwin.
Noted author Fred Litwin. And of course, Fred is also the author of I Was a Teenage JFK Conspiracy Freak, On the Trail of Delusion, and Oliver Stone's Film Flam, The Demagogue of Dealey Plaza.
Fred Litwin is here. He's a longtime author and certainly watcher of politics.
Joining us, Fred Litwin. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
So welcome to another edition of On the Trail of Delusion, where I try to separate fact from fiction, the wheat from the chaff, and give you an alternative to the conspiracy nonsense out there on YouTube. Well, tonight we got a really interesting show. One of my JFK buddies, somebody we've been to Dallas with, we've been to New Orleans together, somebody who knows the assassination in and out, my friend Bill Brown. Bill Brown is from Cincinnati. He's been studying the JFK assassination since 1985. After 20 years of study, he started to gravitate more towards the murder of Officer J.D. Tippit, and now he's really looking into what actually happened in Oak Cliff. So we're going to talk about the murder of Tippit, we're going to talk about Oak Cliff, but we're also going to talk about conspiracy theorists, the kind of questions they ask, the way they analyze information, and some of the nonsense you see on the internet. So welcome, Bill. Tell me, what got you interested into the JFK assassination?
What got me interested was, so I was in 10th grade, my sophomore year in high school, and had study hall. And every day after they took roll call, if we wanted to, we could go to the library. And I went to the library every day. And this particular day, I guess I had no homework assignments due, so I was going through the true crime section in the library, and I just came across The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop. And I picked the book up off the shelf. I started reading it. I started just, fast forwarding through it and standing right. I actually remember it standing right there in the library in that aisle, leaning against the shelf, reading Jim Bishop's book, and it was gripping. I was pulled in. And, the minute by minute account, the assassins up in the window, that kind of stuff. And I just got hooked. So I checked out the book and I started reading it. I was reading it in class instead of paying attention to my schoolwork, and then the rest is history. But that's how it got started, was Jim Bishop's The Day Kennedy Was Shot.
When I started with the Geraldo Rivera show in 1975, but a couple of weeks after that show, we did a second show, and Jim Bishop was on that show.
Oh yeah, okay.
He was like one of the first people on the show to really, to argue in favor of a lone gunman, and so I went to the library, and that was one of the first books I read as well.
Okay, good.
After Mark Lane, of course.
Yeah. So Rush to Judgment was your first book, or?
Rush to Judgment was the first book, and that really got me hooked. Okay. And the problem for me was I was in Montreal, Canada, and so I couldn't check any of his footnotes because no library in Montreal had the 26 volumes.
Okay.
So I couldn't, it was frustrating because I really wanted to check some of this stuff and I couldn't do it. And I had to wait years to finally realize, oh my God, his footnotes don't really check out very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let's talk a bit about JD Tippit. So, it's quite the mystery. Do we know what happened in the murder of JD Tippit?
We do. Some conspiracy advocates will like to argue that we don't, but we do. The murder of J.D. Tippit and Oswald's guilt in that murder is a fact.
Yeah, and I think, David Bellin said it's the Rosetta Stone of the JFK assassination. But the evidence. Well, don't you think the evidence is overwhelming? It's pretty clear.
Is the evidence, if you consider eyewitness testimony evidence, which I do, I think eyewitness testimony is evidence, along with the ballistics evidence. It is overwhelming, and that's why I say that it's a fact that Oswald murdered Tippit. If you want to argue regarding the Kennedy assassination, maybe we should say that it's a 99% probability that Oswald murdered President Kennedy, just because there's that, you got to leave that 1% or maybe even just a 0.5% open, because nobody saw. if you want to, I discount Howard Brennan. Okay, I discount his testimony because I don't know how you can do height weight from 6 floors below. That there's no way. But so I'm just going to set Brennan aside. So there's really nobody that places Oswald in the window. Okay. So that's why you got to leave that 0.5% open. You can't state it's a 100% certainty that Oswald assassinated President Kennedy, even though I do believe that's exactly what happened. But regarding the Tippit case, with all of the eyewitness testimony we have, along with the physical evidence, which we'll talk about, it's undoubtedly a fact. It is a fact that Lee Harvey Oswald murdered Patrolman J.D. Tippit.
Well, did anybody see Oswald?
Let's start from the depository from the time the assassination happened, and let's get into Tenth and Patton.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So the FBI, the Secret Service, David Bellin, all these guys, they wanted to see how long it would take Oswald to get from the depository's front steps.
The solid lines are the known routes, and the broken lines the assumed routes taken by Oswald on his escape from the Texas School Book Depository building. All times are approximate. According to the reconstruction of time and events by the President's Commission, Oswald left the building about 12:33 p.m., 3 minutes after the assassination. He walked east on Elm Street to the corner of Elm and Murphy Streets, a distance of 0.4 of a mile. Boarded a bus at 12:40 p.m. that was going west on Elm Street. He remained on the bus about 4 minutes and exited between Lamar and Poydras Streets after traveling a little less than 0.2 of a mile. Walked 0.2 of a mile to where he boarded a taxi cab at 12:48 p.m. The cab followed this route over the Houston Street Viaduct, turned left onto Beckley, and let Oswald out near the Beckley and Neely Street intersection at 12:54 p.m. after traveling a distance of 2 4/10 miles. Oswald had passed his rooming house by 0.3 of a mile. He entered the rooming house at 1 p.m. and left at 1:03 p.m., zipping up his jacket. His next known location was when he shot Dallas patrolman J.D. Tippit near 10th and Patton Streets at 1:16 p.m., a distance of 0.9 of a mile from his rooming house. He ran west on 10th Street and turned south on Patton Street and back west on Jefferson Street. Witnesses lost him here in the vicinity of a gasoline service station. His jacket was later found in the parking lot behind the service station, 0.2 of a mile from the Tippit shooting. Oswald was later observed acting in a suspicious manner about 150 feet from the Texas Theater and was observed entering the theater at 1:40 p.m. without paying. He was apprehended in the theater 0.6 of a mile from the Tippit shooting at 1:50 p.m. 34 minutes after the Tippit shooting and 1 hour and 20 minutes after the assassination of President Kennedy.
And with the help of Cecil McWaters, who was the bus driver, and William Whaley, who was the cab driver. So they basically, they have Oswald leaving the depository building at 12:33, so 3 minutes after the assassination. And he walks 7 blocks east into downtown on Elm Street, and he gets on Cecil McWaters' bus. Now, based on where McWaters testified that the guy got on the bus, because McWaters said that he was stuck in traffic. He wasn't at a bus stop. He was stuck in traffic. Guy bangs on the door. McWaters opens the door and lets him get on the bus. So McWaters tells us where that was. So they walked with a stopwatch. They walked from the depository to that point and determined it took 6.5 minutes. So if we have Oswald leaving at 12:33, we have him getting on the bus between 12:39 and 12:40.
Right.
McWaters says that he was on the bus for no more than 4 minutes. The bus wasn't moving. So a lady got off because she was worried she was going to miss her bus at the Greyhound station. So a lady gets off, and Oswald apparently decided that's a good idea. I'm going to get off too. So Oswald gets a transfer, and we know that Oswald was on that bus because he had McWaters' specific stamped bus transfer on his person when he was arrested. So Oswald is on the bus for about 4 minutes, and if he's basically 12:44, he's off the bus. Now he's walking the 3 to 4 short blocks over to the Greyhound station, and they determined that it was a 4-minute walk to the point where Oswald boarded Whaley's cab. So now we have Oswald getting in the cab around 12:48. Okay. Now they drove with Whaley from the point Oswald entered the cab to the point Oswald got out of the cab. And so Oswald gets in the cab and he tells Whaley 500 North Beckley. Now, for those who may not know, the address of the rooming house was 1026 North Beckley. So Oswald gives Whaley an address for whatever reason, 5 blocks past or 5 blocks south of the rooming house. So when they pass the rooming house, they get to the 700 block. So they're 2 blocks short of the original destination. They're at the 700 block, which is Beckley and Neely. And Oswald tells Whaley, this will do fine right here. And Oswald gets out of the cab. He gave him $1. Whaley says that he walked across the street. Whaley took off. Basically, they said that the cab ride from the Greyhound station to Beckley and Neely, which is where Oswald got out of the cab, was 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And They did all this with a stopwatch.
Right.
Okay, so now you have Oswald getting out of the cab around 12:53 to 12:54, sometime in between there. And they walked from Beckley and Neely back up to the rooming house, and it was 5 minutes and 45 seconds to make that walk. So we basically have Oswald getting to the rooming house around 12:58 to 12:59.
Right.
Okay. We can call it 12:59. Now, Earlene Roberts, the landlady, she was the housekeeper. She was the housekeeper. She's in there, and she said that she testified that Oswald was back in his room just long enough to grab a jacket and put it on. And that's a direct quote. Just long enough to grab a jacket and put it on.
Right.
Now, how long does it take to grab a jacket and put it on? Okay. Now, obviously, I also believe that he grabbed his revolver as well. But what's that take? 5, 8, 10 seconds. So I believe, this whole Oswald was back in his room for 3, 4, 5, several, many, few minutes. It's all nonsense. He was back in his room and long enough to grab a jacket and put it on. So if he's entering the rooming house at 12:59, I believe he's walking back out of the rooming house at 1 o'clock. I think he was back there for a minute.
Yeah.
So she looks out the window. She sees him standing at the bus stop. That's the last time that Oswald is seen. And now they basically, and Fred, you were with me back in 2020, and we walked from the rooming house to 10th and Patton. And, we're all over 50 years old, and we did it basically 12 minutes and 20 seconds. Some of us did it like in 12:10, some of us did it in 12:30, but basically it was like 12 minutes and 20 seconds. So let's allow a 24-year-old fit Marine, and I say Marine because they're always Marine. There's no such thing as a former Marine. But anyway, let's just say that Oswald could have walked from the rooming house, arrived at 10th and Patton, let's say about 11 and a half minutes, which is only 40 or 50 seconds quicker than it took us to do it. Okay. I hate saying let's just say, but we have to because we know that Oswald could have walked it faster than we did, simply because of age, if nothing else. All right.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, Oswald, if he leaves the rooming house at 1 o'clock sharp, he's at 10th and Patton by 1:11, 1:11:30. And I say this is for the first time because I believe Oswald was walking west when he encountered Tippit. So in other words, he was walking from the direction of Marsalis, walking west towards Patton on 10th. So how do you get Oswald walking west? Well, Dale Myers puts forth a theory that so Oswald is, if you're at the rooming house, Oswald has the transfer. I believe Oswald's destination, in my own opinion, was either the library, the Jefferson Branch Library, or the bus stop right outside the library. Okay. And because the transfer that Oswald had on him that he got from McWaters would have been good at the bus, at that bus stop, or the next available bus. So, in my opinion, and Oswald had, I think it was like $13.87 on him after he gave Whaley, the cab fare. And that was determined by Bellin, who looked into this, that would have been enough for him to catch a Greyhound bus to get him to Laredo, Texas. Okay. So in my opinion, Oswald leaves the rooming house, stands at the bus stop momentarily outside the rooming house, and then decides to walk towards the Jefferson Branch Library, being aware that the Marsalis bus, he could have caught a bus there. Point being, though, when you're on 10th Street and when you're walking east on 10th, 10th Street makes about a 45-degree curve, about a block and a half east of 10th and Patton. All right. So Dale Myers puts forth a theory that there was a sheriff's deputy in that vicinity when Oswald reaches the curve on 10th Street as he's walking towards the library, towards the bus stop. And the reason why Dale puts forth this theory is because after Tippit is shot and T.F. Boley, the citizen using the police radio, reports the shooting on Tippit's patrol car radio, there is now on the Dallas County Sheriff transcripts, we see where a Unit 109 reports to his dispatcher a couple of minutes after the Tippit shooting that he's in the vicinity of Jefferson and Marsalis. This is what he tells his dispatcher. So the theory goes that if he's there a couple minutes after the shooting, what if he was there a couple minutes before the shooting? So you have Oswald reaches that curve on 10th Street. He notices, and before you reach that curve, you can't see anything further east on 10th. But once you reach that curve and you make that slight curve, now a whole new world opens up to Oswald. He can see another 3 or 4 blocks down. And this is perhaps where Unit 109 may have been sitting eating lunch in a parking lot or something. Or as police officers do, they sit in the patrol cars in parking lots. See it all the time. So Oswald turns around. Now he's walking west on 10th. Okay. And you can walk from 10th and Patton to that curve and then back to 10th and Patton in about 4 minutes. I did it myself and did it in 2 minutes and 8 seconds from the patrol car to the curve. Point being, you have to have Oswald walking west on 10th, and he can get there by 1:15. And the most important thing, Fred, is Oswald doesn't have to get to the Tippit encounter early. He's just got to get there right at that split second to encounter Tippit. He doesn't have to be there early.
Yeah.
Hopefully I've covered how Oswald gets from the depository at 12:33 to 10th and Patton at 1:15.
Yeah, let me just ask you. I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, how when you started 12:33 and him, walking, have you done that walk from the book depository?
I have not.
Okay, just wondering if all of these elements, how much have you tried or done?
So I personally have walked from Beckley and Neely back to the rooming house, and I did it in less than 6 minutes. And I've walked from the rooming house to 10th and Patton and did it in barely over 12 minutes. But I have not walked from the depository east on Elm to the point where Oswald got on the bus. And then I have not walked from the point Oswald exited the bus over to the Greyhound station, nor have I driven from the Greyhound station to Beckley and Neely over in Oak Cliff.
We'll have to try those walks.
I rely on the
time.
FBI, the Secret Service, and the reenactments for that.
We'll have to try that walk next time we're in Dallas.
Yeah, we can. That's something we can do. Absolutely.
The other thing. I mean, I was I was at the Lancer conference in December. I was sitting with Jerry Daly at our table. We were the sane table, by the way, which was kind of nice. He was talking about Oswald. Back then, there were no fences around people's gardens, and Oswald could have taken a route, through a variety of back gardens, and I think there was a little park or something, and so we don't really know exactly his route, but there could have been shortcuts.
But the one thing to keep in mind, though, if you're at the rooming house, and anybody listening right now, you can do Google Earth. If you're at 1026 North Beckley, and your goal is the Jefferson Branch Library and or the bus stop right outside of the library, okay, then the quickest route to get from the rooming house to that bus stop has you walking east on 10th Street, believe it or not.
Mm. Yeah, I think quite possibly. I mean, we don't really know where Oswald was going. He might have thought about the library, well into the walk or at some point. I mean, I do like the idea of him hanging out in the library. That would sort of be consistent. Sure. I don't actually think he was going to take a bus because if he really thought about getting away, he would have kept more money and not given Marina $170.
Yeah.
Once you buy your bus ticket to Laredo and you get there, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of money in Mexico.
Yeah. You kind of need to eat.
The other thing is, of course, when Oswald was doing the walks, I mean, he had just killed the president. He's got all this adrenaline rushing through his body. He's charging, through Dallas. I mean, he's going to go fast.
He's walking with a purpose.
Walking with a real purpose. I mean, I just don't know. The other thing I want to ask you is the nature of an alibi. You see this in, walking down the stairs in the Texas School Book Depository and with the Tippit case, and people keep on trying to say, oh, there's an alibi. Wasn't enough time to go down the stairs. No, wasn't enough time to get to 10th and Patton. But the real nature of an alibi is it has to be something really substantial that's makes it impossible for you to be there. Mm-hmm. And these people are arguing about seconds when they don't know exactly when the person started, when the person ended, and they don't know the speed. All these variables are unknown.
Right. Absolutely unknown. And here's the thing. We don't have to prove the unknowns. All we have to do is show that he could have got to 10th and Patton by 1:15. We don't have to deal with it. But if we it took longer to do this. It took longer to walk up Elm Street. It took longer to take the cab. It took longer to walk back from Beckley and Neely back to the room. We don't have to deal with that. All we got to do is take the minimums, and we can easily get Oswald to 10th and Patton, walking west on 10th, by the way, not just
Right.
east on 10th,
Yeah.
walking west on 10th by 1:15.
Yeah. So yeah, so clearly he got to 10th and Patton. So, Tippit is shot. Tell us a bit about the witnesses who saw Oswald.
At 10th and Denver, there were two fellows named Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith. Okay, now these two guys, 10th and Denver is one block east of 10th and Patton. Okay, and they're out in the front yard. It's the house on the corner. I guess it would be the northeast corner of 10th and Denver. Jimmy Burt notices a guy walking from east to west on 10th Street, across the street from them, crossing over Denver and continuing west on 10th towards Patton, which would be the next block down. So Jimmy Burt notices this guy walking, didn't think anything else of it. Him and Bill Smith got ready to go inside when all of a sudden they noticed that a police car about 3/4 of the way down the block is now pulled over. And you know how you in a neighborhood, when you see a police car pull over, you kind of look and watch and see what's going on for a second.
Yeah.
And so they saw the police car pull over, and they saw the guy walking on the sidewalk, talking to the police officer through the passenger side window. And after watching this for a few seconds, they decided, well, we're going to go inside. So they started to go inside, and this is all from Jimmy Burt's interview in 1968 with Al Chapman. They started to go inside, and that's when they heard the gunshots ring out. Jimmy Burt said he looked down the street and said, "Hey, Billy, that guy just shot that police officer." Bill Smith, in his Warren Commission testimony, says he looked and he said that he saw the officer fall, and he said Oswald, but he said he saw Oswald running from the scene and the officer fall. But I don't really put Bill Smith in the category of identifying Oswald because he never saw the killer walking earlier like Jimmy Burt did.
Right.
And he was too far away to make that kind of an identification, in my opinion. So Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith are in the front yard at 10th and Denver. Jimmy Burt sees the guy walking on 10th Street. And now the guy is walking west on 10th. And as he gets to a certain point, Tippit is driving in his patrol car from the west heading east. In other words, driving straight towards Oswald. And for whatever reason, Tippit felt the need to pull up alongside the curb and I'm assuming call him over. And I got to tell you that Tippit was unalarmed when he did this because a police officer who's feeling like he's about to be talking to somebody who he suspects of wrongdoing, he's not going to call him over to his patrol car because that puts the police officer in a vulnerable position. Okay. So the simple fact that Tippit, in my opinion, called him over, Tippit really didn't suspect. I mean, I don't think Tippit was thinking to himself, this guy could be the guy that assassinated President Kennedy, So Oswald comes over. They have a conversation. I guess Tippit didn't like what he was hearing or had more questions and decided finally after 10 or 15 seconds to simply get out of the car. And he gets out of the car, and Domingo Benavides is in a pickup truck. He's approaching. He's coming from the east, driving west. So he's coming the same way Oswald was walking. So he's driving towards the pulled over patrol car. Benavides says the first thing he noticed was when he was at 10th and Denver, which is a block to the east, he noticed the police car pulled over. And then as he starts so he goes through the intersection. Now he's driving towards the patrol car. He notices that Tippit has already gotten out of the car at this point. And he wasn't looking, but he heard the gunshots. And he swerves over to the right, almost up against the curb, he said. I think he even said he drove up onto the curb. Okay. He said he was about 15 feet away from the front of the patrol car when the shooting rings out. So he ducks down in his truck. So you have Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith are in the front yard. They're looking down the street. You have Benavides in his pickup truck. Now you have Helen Markham. She's at the corner of 10th and Patton. She's at I guess that would be the northwest corner of 10th and Patton, walking to her bus stop. So she's catty-cornered from the corner in question. She's watching the guy walking, talking to the police officer. She noticed the police officer, go through the intersection. She's standing at the corner. She's watching what's going on. And she sees the shooting take place. She literally sees Tippit get out. She said in a relaxed manner. He wasn't alarmed, calmly got out of the car in a friendly way. And As Tippit starts to go around the front of the car, when he's at the hood, that's when Oswald backed up away from the car a couple steps, pulled out a revolver and shot him from across the hood. So Markham is watching this happen. Benavides is driving his pickup truck right towards him and swerves over to the right. Burt and Smith are in the front yard a block down. Now you have William Scoggins was sitting in his cab, and I'm going by these witnesses one at a time because it's going to matter in a second. So
Right.
William Scoggins is in his cab, and he's sitting there eating his lunch at the corner of 10th and Patton. Now he's on Patton, facing north, so he's facing the intersection of 10th Street with Patton. And he sees Tippit slowly cruise across the intersection from the west to the east, right in front of his front bumper, really, because Scoggins is sitting almost at the stop sign.
Right.
So Tippit strolls through the intersection 10 or 12 miles an hour, and Scoggins noticed that 2 or 3 houses down, the patrol car pulls over, and Scoggins, thinking nothing of it, continues eating his lunch. Well, all of a sudden, he hears the shots, and Scoggins said that he looked over and saw the officer clutch at his chest and then drop to the ground. So Scoggins actually saw Tippit get out of the car and was standing. And when he got shot, he said he saw him clutch at his chest. And then right there on the corner in the house right beside where Scoggins was sitting were 2 sisters-in-law, Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis. Now they're inside the living room. I think they were putting the kids down for a nap, so they were laying down with the kids. Well, they hear the gunshots. They both
Right.
get up and go to the front door. They're at the screen door. And Barbara Davis gets there, and she says the first thing she notices was Helen Markham across the street, catty corner from her, yelling that he just shot that officer. He just shot that man. And then Barbara Davis, she like refocused her attention, and she notices that there's Lee Harvey Oswald cutting across her front yard with a gun in his hand. And Barbara Davis says this, Virginia Davis was standing right beside her. So these 2 girls are shoulder to shoulder at the screen door looking out, and they see Lee Oswald cutting across their front yard, heading right towards Scoggins' cab, by the way. Scoggins says he jumps the bushes onto the sidewalk onto Patton and now proceeds to go south on Patton. So now you have Burt and Smith, they're down in the front yard, a block, like I said, a block east. They just see the killer going around the corner, now going south on Patton. You have Benavides in his truck, and he's peeping up over the dashboard, and he saw the killer turn the corner to go south on Patton. Markham is at the corner of 10th and Patton, and she's dropped to the ground covering her face, and killer's going south on Patton. Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis saw the guy cut right across their yard, obviously going south on Patton once he cut across the bushes right there. And then you have Scoggins, who's gotten out of his cab at this point, and he says the guy jumped the bushes and started going south on Patton. Now, further down south on Patton, you have Sam Ginyard, who was washing cars at Deutsch Motor Company. He was a porter there, and he's about at the halfway point down the block between 10th Street and Jefferson. He's washing cars. He hears the shots, and he goes out to the sidewalk on Patton, and he looks up the street towards 10th. Also, you have Ted Calloway, who is the manager of the same car lot. He's in his office. He hears the shots. He goes out to the sidewalk, just like Ginyard did, and looks up the street. Now, Ginyard is at the halfway point down the block, pretty close to the alley, which is the back of the car lot. The back of the car lot meets up with the alley.
Right.
Calloway was closer down towards Jefferson. He was about 3/4 of the way down the block. So if you're Oswald, you just cut through the front yard there at the corner, and you're going south on Patton now, and you see these 2 guys looking up at you. You're going to cross the street, which is exactly what Oswald did. He doesn't want to run past these 2 guys, right? Even though he's got a gun, he still doesn't want to go right past them. So he crosses the street. Now he's going south on Patton on the west side of Patton. Sam Ginyard is watching this, and Calloway, we all know the story, yells out to him, "Hey, man, what the hell's going on?" Calloway later said that he didn't know a police officer had been killed, or he wouldn't have yelled that. He said he didn't know that. He said he actually thought that Oswald might have been some sort of a security officer of some sort. Okay. So you got Oswald coming down the street right here.
Yeah.
Okay. You got Sam Ginyard right there, and Ted Calloway right here. And Oswald's just right here. They can easily identify him, which they did do.
Yeah.
Okay. So when Oswald gets into now this building, see this brown building across the street?
Yeah.
In 1963, that building wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was a little 2-story office building, and it was another used car lot, and it was called the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company. Okay. In 1963, that was the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company.
Okay.
And there were 4 men in that building, and they heard the shots. Okay, you had Warren Reynolds, O.J. Lewis, Pat Patterson, and Harold Russell. Now, these 4 men are in that building, and they hear the shots, and they're all looking up the street. All 4 of them see the gunman running down the street with the gun in his hand, like he's fiddling with it, like he's.
Okay.
They all 4 see this happening.
Yeah. When he gets to the corner, they said what he did was he stopped running, and he tucked the revolver in his waistband and started to walk, almost like a new street, new demeanor.
Yeah.
New street, new demeanor. All right. So L.J. Lewis, one of the four men.
Did he have the jacket on?
He did.
Okay.
He's got the jacket on still. So L.J. Lewis, one of the four men in this building, he goes back inside to call the police. Okay. Harold Russell, second of the four men, leaves the building, comes up the street to see what happened up here because that's where they heard the shots. Okay. He goes the one block here. In fact, Harold Russell is on the scene when the cops arrive. Now the other two men here, Warren Reynolds and Pat Patterson, they decide they're going to follow the guy.
Okay.
So Oswald gets to the corner, tucks the revolver into his waistband, and heads this way on Jefferson. So here's what I'm saying though. So see that Santos muffler?
Yeah.
In 1963, that was a Texaco station.
All right.
Okay. So Oswald is now going this way. Still has his jacket on.
Yeah.
Now let me lay everybody out for you. So Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith have now reached the patrol car. They're at the patrol car now. Markham's at the patrol car. Benavides is out of his truck. Benavides has got on the mic, the police mic. He has now started to try to key the mic to report the shooting to the police dispatcher, but he didn't know how to use the police radio. Okay. Harold Russell's going up the street. L.J. Lewis is inside calling the police, and then Warren Reynolds and Pat Patterson are now following the guy from across the street. So when he gets to the Santos muffler up here, there's a Texaco station. He cuts behind the Texaco station. Now, there were two people that worked at the Texaco station. Robert Brock was a mechanic, and his wife was Mary Brock. They both saw the guy cut behind the Texaco station. Robert Brock was questioned by the FBI and could not tell them yay or nay whether the man that he saw was Lee Oswald. However, Mary Brock, his wife, said, yes, the man I saw cut behind the gas station was Lee Harvey Oswald. So she positively identifies Oswald as the man she saw cut behind the Texaco station. Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, let's count them. Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith is 2. Benavides is 3. Helen Markham is 4. Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis makes 6. William Scoggins in his cab, that makes 7. Sam Ginyard and Ted Calloway make 9. The 4 guys at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, Harold Russell, Pat Patterson, Warren Reynolds, and L.J. Lewis, that makes 13. Okay. Right. You have 13 people who either saw the shooting or saw the killer flee from the scene. Okay. Now let me take just a second to describe what each of these witnesses said, and I won't take long.
Yeah.
But okay. So Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith both told that they didn't go to a lineup, but they told the FBI what they saw. There's FBI reports. Neither one of them identified Oswald as the killer, but at the same time, they didn't say it wasn't Oswald. They couldn't say one way or the other. Okay. Benavides in his pickup truck could not say it was Oswald, but didn't say it wasn't Oswald. Okay. Helen Markham testified, and she actually went to a lineup that night, a police lineup, and picked Oswald as the man she saw shoot the police officer. Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis went to a police lineup that night. Both of them picked Oswald as the man they saw cutting across their front yard with a gun. William Scoggins went to a lineup on Saturday. Okay. And he said he picked Oswald out of the lineup, said that was the guy I saw running right towards my cab. And then Sam Ginyard and Ted Calloway, these guys are on Patton. Both of them went to a lineup on Friday night. Both of them picked Oswald at the lineup. Okay. And then at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, Harold Russell told the FBI, because all 4 of these men were visited by the FBI at this Johnny Reynolds Motor Company. And Harold Russell told the FBI that he couldn't say for certain if it was Oswald or not. Warren Reynolds, Pat Patterson, and Harold Russell did say it was Oswald. L.J. Lewis said he wasn't sure one way or the other. Right. So we have 13 witnesses, and you have Burton Smith and Benavides, and then you have L.J. Lewis at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company. These 4 people weren't sure one way or the other whether the killer was Oswald, but the other 9 either went to a lineup or told the FBI in a photo lineup that Oswald was the man they saw either shooting the police officer or running from the scene. So you have 13 people. 9 people said it was Oswald. 4 weren't sure, and 0 out of the 13 said it was not Oswald.
What about Miss Clemens?
So it could be debatable whether Clemens is even a witness. You know, she said when she heard the shots, at first she thought they were firecrackers. So she was inside her house. You see in the interview with Mark Lane, she's inside the house. She goes out.
I don't consider Clemens a witness, and the reason why is because we don't hear from her until after the fact. And I discount any witness. I don't rely on Jack Tatum, who said he drove by before the shots rang out and says it was Oswald. Says he even remembers the curl of his upper lip or the curl of his smile, the way, you know. But I don't rely on Tatum because it's after the fact. I personally try to stick with uh, that weekend and the initial month or two afterward, because the witnesses at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, they were interviewed by the FBI in January. So, 6, 7 weeks later, almost 2 months later, almost. But we don't hear from Markham. Mark Lane.
And Clemens, I mean, Clemens.
Yeah, we don't hear from Clemens. Yeah. Mark Lane, 1 minute he says, we have this witness that the FBI has declined to interview, and the next minute, he says they interviewed her but ignored her. He's all over the map. We don't really need to get into Mark Lane and his lies and the way he twists things around. But personally, for me, Fred, since you brought her up, I don't really consider Helen Markham a witness. And the only reason why, and it's not because of what she had to say, it's just because we don't hear from her.
No, that's really. I think that's entirely right. But isn't it amazing? I mean, all the witnesses you talk about only saw one man do the shooting, not
Correct.
two.
That's a great point. So, you could argue that the four guys at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, Harold Russell, Pat Patterson, L.J. Lewis, and Warren Reynolds, they didn't see the killing. They just saw a guy running down Patton with a gun. But you can't say they saw the killer because they didn't see the killing. But they did see the killer because they saw the same guy
Yeah.
that Ted Calloway and Sim Ginyard are right there on the sidewalk on Patton. They're watching the guy run down. So these guys at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company saw that same guy that Calloway and Ginyard saw. And we know that Calloway and Ginyard saw the killer because they saw the same guy that Helen Markham saw. And Markham did see the killing.
Right.
So
it's one person. I mean, they try to say Clemens said there were two killers or two.
Here's the thing, though. Killer Clemens doesn't even say that. She doesn't even say that the two guys are even associated with each other. That's just a spin that Mark Lane put on it.
It's the same thing with Lee Bowers, right? He saw two cars driving, behind the fence in the parking lot, but he actually said they weren't associated with
right, exactly. Yeah, and
totally
he saw two men at the mouth of the underpass. These two men didn't know each other.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
So anyway, look, what's the controversy here? Seems pretty clear.
Well, you know what? As far as the controversy goes, listen to this, and I compare this to the 9/11 attack, the World Trade Centers in New York City. Just because people question the evidence does not automatically mean that the evidence itself is questionable. So just because people want to question whether 9/11 was an inside job, it doesn't really mean it's questionable. It didn't happen. You can question it, but it doesn't make it questionable. So
right.
you can question whether Oswald murdered Tippit. You can question the evidence. You can question the eyewitness identifications, and you can question the ballistic evidence. You can question it all you want to, but just because you're questioning it does not mean it's questionable. It's not questionable. Question it all you want, it still isn't questionable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, conspiracy theorists these days they try to use a variety of tricks to sort of explain away the evidence. Number one, they'll use chain of custody, or they'll use legal arguments that this is not admissible in a court of law. I mean, they have various tricks because they know the evidence is so damning.
Yeah. So, but there's no issue with the chain of custody. So let's talk about the shell casings, and since you brought up chain of custody,
Yeah.
Okay. After he fired the shots, the Oswald is literally removing shells out of the revolver. My opinion, because he wants to reload, because he doesn't know if around the next corner there's going to be another police officer, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to reload? I would.
Yeah.
So he's reloading. He's removing spent shell casings. He throws them on the ground. Benavides says that Benavides is in his pickup truck right there, 15 feet away. He says after firing the shots, the killer, and when I'm talking about Benavides, I'll say the killer because Benavides didn't identify Oswald. Okay. So Benavides says the killer backed up onto the sidewalk and took off for the corner, throwing a couple shells down as he did. And then he gets to the corner and he throws two more shells down. So 4 shell casings were found at the scene. We'll call shells number 1 and 2, we'll call these the Benavides shells, because Benavides, after everything settled down, the police are on the scene. He goes over to where he saw the killer throw a couple shells down, and he picks them up and turns them into Officer Joe Poe, who was right there at the scene.
Right.
Now, the third shell casing, we'll call this shell number 3, Barbara Davis found a shell lying next to the bushes next to her house. And she calls over Captain Doty, who's the captain of the crime lab. He's the head of the crime lab. He comes over, picks up the shell casing. That's shell casing number 3, picked up by Captain Doty, as pointed out to him by Barbara Davis.
Right.
So about an hour or two after everybody left, it's starting to get dark. It's about 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Virginia Davis, Barbara Davis's sister-in-law, she finds a shell casing outside. Barbara Davis calls the Dallas Police Department and says, "Hey, my sister found another shell casing." So the Dallas Police Department, they send out Detective Doherty and Brown to pick up the shell casing. And while they were there, they took the 2 girls to headquarters to go attend the lineup, which they attended and picked Oswald. So we have these 4 shell casings. Shells 1 and 2 are the Benavides/Poe shells. Shell 3 is Barbara Davis. Shell 4 is Virginia Davis. Killian, Cunningham, Frazier, and Nickel are the 4 firearms experts. 3 of them with the FBI, Nickel with the state of Illinois. Well, they fired test rounds out of Oswald's revolver, the revolver taken from him when he was arrested, for comparison, for ballistic comparisons. And they determined through ballistic testing that these 4 shell casings that were found at the scene, they linked all 4 of these experts independent of each other.
Right.
They were able to link these 4 shell casings found at the scene to the revolver taken from Oswald when he was arrested inside the theater, to the exclusion of every other weapon in the world. Okay. So we know that Oswald was in possession of the weapon that was responsible for the shell casings found at the scene of where Tippit was murdered. Okay. As far as chain of custody, there's no issue whatsoever with the chain of custody of the shells 3 and 4. Barbara Davis turned over, she found a shell on the ground. Captain Doty comes over. And then shell number 4, Detective Doherty. So the FBI visited these 2 guys in May or June of 64.
Right.
And they presented Doty and Doherty with all 4 shell casings. And they said, "Are any of these particular 4 shell casings a shell that you handled that day?" Both Doherty and Doty identified the shell casing they handled, which was shell 3 and shell 4. Okay. So even if you want to question the chain of custody of shells 1 and 2, which I still think that is intact as well. Okay.
Right.
The chain of custody for shells 3, which is the Captain Doty shell, and shell 4, which is the Detective Doherty shell, is 100% ironclad. There's no problem whatsoever. And I've never had any conspiracy advocate spell out exactly what is the problem with the chain of custody of those 2 shells. And the bottom line is those 2 shells were ballistically linked to the revolver taken from Oswald, to the exclusion of any other weapon in the world.
Right.
There's no chain of custody issue with shells 3 and 4.
I think conspiracy theories. Well, we don't know exactly when those shells were fired from the gun.
But they're bringing up questions that aren't even raised at a trial.
Right. Yeah.
The defense doesn't even want to argue that, because the defense doesn't want the jury to notice that the defense is, for whatever reason, trying to get these shells thrown out. The defense doesn't want the jury to think, why is the defense trying so hard to get these shell casings thrown out as evidence?
Right.
First of all, that wouldn't have even happened anyway, because there would have been an evidentiary hearing before the trial. And basically at the evidentiary hearing, Doty and Doherty would have authenticated shell number 3 and shell number 4. So then once that happens, once you go to trial, the defense isn't going to question that evidence, because it's already been dealt with at the evidentiary hearing. So you're not even doing this in front of the jury anyway.
Right. I don't know if you saw, if you go to the Ruby trial, how they introduced Ruby's gun into the trial. All they had was the police officer who took it off him.
Right.
Identify the gun. That was it.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And
there's nothing else.
You're
and
exactly
so that
right,
was the way they do things in 1964.
Let's take the jacket, for example. They like to argue, the jacket that was found behind the Texaco station. They like to argue about, there's no chain of custody for this jacket. And a little bit later, we'll explain why the jacket is damning towards Oswald's guilt. But for now, let's just talk about the jacket regarding this whole chain of custody issue. Had there been a trial in 1964, Bill Alexander would have went to the Dallas Police Department, and he would have said, "Who found the jacket?" They would have said, "Westbrook." Westbrook's the one that picked it up from underneath the car. They would have went to Westbrook and said, "You picked up the jacket from underneath the car?" He says, "Yes." "Who'd you give it to?" He would have said, "Officer X." They then would have went to Officer X and said, "What did you do with the jacket once Westbrook gave it to you?" He says, "Well, I took it to headquarters and turned it over to Officer Y in the crime lab." Point being, had there been a trial, they would have found out who Officer X and Officer Y were.
Yeah.
And then somebody reading about that particular trial, let's say this had nothing to do with the assassination of the president. Let's say this was the guy who killed a cop, and you read about this trial 60 years later. You're going to read about the trial, and you're going to be like, well, there's no chain of custody problems with the jacket because Westbrook turned it over to Jones, who turned it over to Smith. Okay. That's it. That's how it works. But
was that jacket Oswald's? What about the color?
But real quick though, because there was no trial,
yeah,
it never was determined who Officer X and who Officer Y were because there was no need to do it now. So therefore, 60 years later, we don't have a chain of custody for the jacket, and we don't. But that doesn't mean anything at all because in 64 there would have been. It would have been put in place.
That's a really good point. That's a very good point.
Right. And
so was that jacket Oswald's?
So here's the thing. So Sam Ginyard actually, now he was the porter washing cars, and he's standing on the sidewalk on Patton. He was shown Warren Commission Exhibit 162, which is the jacket, during his Warren Commission testimony, and stated matter-of-factly that is the jacket that I saw Lee Oswald wearing as he was running down Patton.
Right.
Marina Oswald, during her testimony, and this is important because Ginyard saw the jacket only long enough to watch the killer run down Patton, even though, again, he says that is the jacket. But Marina Oswald testified she was shown Warren Commission Exhibit 162 and asked if it belonged to Lee. She said one word, yes. That jacket that was found behind the Texaco station belonged to Lee Oswald. And here's the thing, too. Erlene Roberts, the housekeeper, she said that Oswald came in, was back in his room just long enough to grab a jacket and put it on, then went back out the front door, zipping it up as he went out the door. All right. She even told a radio station in an interview that afternoon that he left wearing a short gray coat. Now, forget 10th and Patton. Forget the murder of Officer Tippit, okay? Let's deal with the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald is seen on Jefferson Boulevard ducking into the shoe store entrance to most likely avoid police cars on Jefferson. Johnny Brewer testified to the Warren Commission what the guy was wearing. And he describes the guy's, his height, weight, the color of his pants. He was asked specifically, was he wearing a jacket? He said no. Okay. He also testified, he gave an affidavit, a same-day affidavit, when he described what the killer was wearing. Now, this was months before his testimony. This was the weekend of the killing. He signs he gives an affidavit, and in the affidavit, he describes what the guy was wearing. And he describes the shirt in detail, making no mention. He describes the guy's pants, his shirt, his height, his weight, makes no mention of a jacket.
Right.
Then he testifies months later. He's asked if the guy's wearing a jacket, and he says no. So the point being, forget 10th and Patton, forget Tippit. Say it never happened. Why did Lee Harvey Oswald get rid of the jacket that he had on when he went out the front door of the rooming house on Beckley between that point and the time that he's seen by Johnny Brewer on Jefferson? Why did he get rid of that jacket? And nobody has ever made any sense of that one because they know what it means for Oswald to get rid of his jacket. They know what it means, and they don't want to deal with it.
What about, wasn't there a jacket found in the Texas School Book Depository?
Yeah, the darker one. Yeah. So 10 days later.
That was his jacket, and that the other one couldn't have been his?
Yeah, well, actually, Marina actually testified that he owned two jackets. So there was like the dark blue one found in the depository, and then the light gray one found, behind the Texaco station. So by the way, one more thing about the jacket. Ahead. So there was an FBI report saying that microscopic fibers were found in the sleeves of the jacket. Okay? Right. And when you compare microscopic fibers for forensic testing, you do so based on three characteristics: color, shade, and twist. Okay. Now, the shirt that Oswald was wearing when he was arrested in the theater, they removed test fibers from that shirt for forensic comparison purposes. The test fibers removed from Oswald's shirt had the exact same color, shade, and twist as the microscopic fibers that were found in the sleeves of the jacket. Okay. So that tells us that it doesn't tell us as a fact that Oswald was wearing that jacket just because he was wearing that shirt. But what it does tell us is whoever was wearing that jacket was wearing a shirt exactly like Oswald's.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Coincidentally, the rifle found up on the 6th floor of the school book depository, the rifle used to assassinate President Kennedy, they removed microscopic fibers from, there was a crevice between the metal butt plate and the wooden stock, and there were microscopic fibers wedged inside that crevice. They took these fibers. They also compared these fibers to the fibers removed from Oswald's arrest shirt. Same thing. They had the same color, they had the same shade, and same twist. And that's all you can compare is those three things. You can't compare anything more. It's color, shade, and twist, and that's it. But they had the same three. They had the same color, shade, and twist as the arrest shirt, the fibers that were found in the crevice of the rifle between the butt plate and the wooden stock.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So that's all convincing. But what about the bullets? The mismatch of the bullets and the shells.
Oh, the mismatch. Okay. So yeah. So the four shells found at the scene, two of the shell casings were Winchester Western shells, and two of the shell casings were Remington Peters. Okay. Now these are the four shell casings found at the scene. But Tippit had 4 bullets removed from his body at the autopsy. And these were 3 Winchester Western bullets and 1 Remington Peters bullet. So you have 3 Winchester Western bullets, 1 Remington Peters bullet, but you have 2 Winchester Western casings and 2 Remington Peters. So there's a mismatch there. Now, J.C. Day, I believe it was J.C. Day first put forth the idea when he was trying to put all this together. And he says, well, what if there was a 5th shot that missed Tippit? What if Oswald fired 5 shots? And what if the bullet that missed was never recovered, never found? And what if so Oswald's throwing 5 shell casings to the ground, not just 4.
Right.
What if that 5th shell casing was never found? Now, if that 5th shell casing that was never found is a Remington, actually the 5th shell casing, if that 5th shell casing is a Winchester Western shell casing, now we have 3 Winchester Western shell casings, not just the 2. And if that 5th bullet that was never found, let's say that's a Remington Peters bullet, now we have 2 Remington Peters bullets, not just the one removed from Tippit's body. So if that's the case, now you have 5 shell casings and 5 bullets. You have 3 Winchester Western shells and 2 Remington Peters shells. And you have 3 Winchester Western bullets and 2 Remington Peters bullets. So all that has to happen, and it's a very plausible scenario, all that has to happen is that 1 shell casing was not found and 1 bullet was never recovered. And also, I got to tell you, the 4 shell casings that were found close to the corner of 10th and Patton. Well, the 4 guys at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, one of them said that he thought that he saw the guy toss a shell down. This will be all the way down by the corner of Patton and Jefferson.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So, okay. I was wondering if we should take a metal detector the next time we go down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
The shell casing or the missing bullet.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
Now the bullet, though, and I don't know if you go to a shooting range and you fire a 38, I'm going to tell you right now, and I've been there, you can miss from 8 or 9 feet. It is not hard to do. And especially if you're trying to hurry to get the drop on a police officer, maybe that first shot is the one that missed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, okay, so we the evidence is pretty clear cut. But maybe it wasn't Oswald. Maybe it was Larry Crawford who did the shooting because he looked like Oswald.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny is the people who want to argue. I've always found this funny anyway. The people who want to argue that Larry Crawford was the killer. There's a photo. So Larry Crawford actually hitchhiked to Michigan after the assassination. He basically bailed. He bailed Dallas and got out of there. The FBI tracked him down in Michigan. They took a picture of him. He's wearing a light tan jacket. So if it's Larry Crawford, what about? I mean, he's wearing the jacket. It's not his jacket. I just think it's kind of funny to try to tie that in. But let me tell you this: anybody that knows about Larry Crawford or read his testimony, he was asleep at the time of the assassination. Okay,
that's right.
The bartender comes in and wakes him up to tell him about the assassination. So if you're Larry Crawford and you're supposed to be, so those who argue that Crawford killed Tippit, what's their point? What are they getting at exactly? Because are they saying that Crawford was in on the plot to what exactly? Was he supposed to kill Tippit for what reason? Point being, why is he asleep at 12:35, 12:40 if he's supposed to be killing Tippit in half an hour?
Well, they'd say that Andy Armstrong got it all wrong, and that look, they don't. Logic is not their strong point.
Yeah,
but
that's another statement.
They're caught. They know that there's a lot of witnesses who identify Oswald, so the only out is okay. Here's somebody who looks like Oswald, although
yes,
it's questionable just how much he looked like Oswald.
Yeah. But you can talk about Larry Crawford all you want. You still can't answer the question of why did Oswald ditch his jacket between the rooming house and Jefferson Boulevard, the shoe store.
Yeah,
And
no,
that's unrelated to Crawford.
yeah, it's to me it's ridiculous because Crawford is you know he's the kind of guy who couldn't hold down a job. He was a drifter, and
Right.
he had told Jack Ruby a few weeks earlier he wanted to leave. Ruby said convinced him to stay for a little bit, and then the time was right. A lot of people were getting out of Dallas then, so he got out of Dallas and went to visit his sister in Michigan.
Right.
You know,
There,
it's not that
there,
mysterious, you know,
no,
and
no, there's nothing mysterious about it whatsoever. And literally, there's no reason. There's zero reason to suspect Crawford in the shooting of Tippit. There's no reason whatsoever to suspect that. They're just picking names, just like Igor Vaganov. They're just picking names and
right.
they're throwing them at Tenth and Patton, and none of it holds any weight whatsoever. And let me tell you this: if Larry Crawford killed Tippit, how did he get the revolver back into Oswald's hands by the time Oswald was arrested inside the movie theater? Because that's the revolver that fired those shell casings.
Right. Well, it was planted on Oswald, right in the
Yeah,
theater.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's just a matter of conspiracy advocates not accepting the evidence. Really, they don't like what the evidence shows, so they don't accept it and they want to question it. And all these things that you see these conspiracy advocates do on all these internet forums and these Facebook groups, a defense attorney is not doing at a trial. A
Right.
defense attorney is not challenging the chain of custody of the shell casings at a trial because they've already been admitted as evidence in the evidence you're hearing.
Yeah. No, I always thought it was a good point that if you keep on harking on some of that evidence, then the jury's going to wonder
Exactly.
why are you so interested in that evidence? You must
Absolutely.
think it's really damning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that I think is important to discuss, the conspiracy people like to argue that Tippit was killed at a point in time too early for Oswald to have reached 10th and Patton. And they say the shooting occurred before 110. You see that argument made all the time. But here's the thing, and let me bear with me on this because I got to explain it slowly.
Yep.
Okay, so T.F. Boley pulls up on the scene,
Right.
and he gets out and he goes over to the patrol car. He sees Benavides fumbling around with the mic, the police mic. He takes it from Benavides. He says Benavides didn't know how to work it. So he takes it from Benavides and he reports the shooting to the dispatcher. Now, this is done at 117. Okay. Let me say that again. T.F. Boley reports the shooting according to the police tapes at 117. All right. Now, when Boley reports the shooting, you can listen to it for yourself. And the dispatcher asks him where. He says on 10th Street between Marsalis and Beckley, which is a pretty wide range. He didn't know exactly where he was, but he knew he was on 10th Street and he was between Marsalis and Beckley. So what happens when he says that? The dispatcher, Murray Jackson, the first thing Jackson does is he calls out for 78. He's looking for a response from Tippit because he knows that's where Tippit's supposed to be in that vicinity. He calls out for 78. He gets no response. He calls out for 78 again. Point being, this is the moment that Murray Jackson realizes that JD Tippit has been shot at 117. Okay.
Right.
Now, keep that in mind for a second. Now, Mary Wright was in her house located on the corner of 10th and Denver, a block east of the shooting scene. She said she heard the shots, and she told George and Patricia Nash in 1964 that she immediately, that's quote, immediately called the police. So Mary Wright calls the police immediately after hearing the shots. Barbara Davis goes to the front door, sees the killer cutting across the yard, goes back inside and calls the police. Okay. L.J. Lewis is a block south at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company.
Right.
He's one of the four guys who sees the killer going south on Patton with the gun in his hands. He goes back inside and calls the police. So you have these three people calling the police. Now, how long do you think it takes from the time a person picks up the phone and dials the operator? Now, back in 1963, there was no 911. They pick up the phone, they call the operator. The operator answers, they say, I need the police department. Operator transfers them to the police department. The person at the police department answers the phone. Hey, I just saw a guy get shot. The person at the police department asks where. They give the location. The person using the phone, calling it in, gives the location. The person at the police department makes a note of the location and the type of offense and puts it on a conveyor belt, which goes straight to the dispatcher. The dispatcher gets this notice and he is able to read what's happened, and he's able to immediately on the police radio inform all units in the area what's just happened and where. Okay. How long do you think all that takes from the time a person picks up the phone to call the police to the time the dispatcher receives it? Minute and a half, maybe? I mean, probably quicker.
Much quicker, yeah.
Yeah, I think probably 45 seconds, but I'm trying to be generous. Okay. Here's the point. Mary Wright called the police immediately. Barbara Davis called the police a few seconds after the shots. O.J. Lewis called the police a few seconds later. At 1:17, Murray Jackson is being made aware for the very first time that Tippit has been shot by T.F. Boley's report using Tippit's patrol car radio. So we know that Mary Wright, Barbara Davis, and O.J. Lewis called the police at like 1:16, because if they would have called earlier, if the shooting would have occurred earlier and they would have called earlier, then
Right.
Murray Jackson would have already known about it by the time T.F. Boley is talking to him on Tippit's squad car radio. Do you understand the point that I'm making?
Yeah, I understand.
So the simple point that Jackson is unaware of the shooting until Boley lets him know at 1:17, that tells you that Mary Wright, Barbara Davis, and O.J. Lewis called the police around 1:16, 1:17. And we know they called the police right away. So the shooting occurred at 1:15. The shooting did not occur at 1:10, and it take these people 7 minutes to call the police because they tell you they did it immediately. Another thing too, Ted Calloway, here's the shots. He goes out to the sidewalk and he's on Patton. He's looking up the street. He sees the killer coming down Patton, get to the corner and start going west on Jefferson. Now he's standing there the whole time watching this, okay? And you can read Calloway's testimony. He tells you what he did. He says, after he went around the corner on Jefferson, I made a good hard run. That's a direct quote, a good hard run up to the corner of 10th and Patton and over to the patrol car. Now, let's say the shots ring out. Ted Calloway hears the shots. He goes over to the sidewalk, and let's say it takes 30 seconds. He looks up the street and sees the killer at the corner of 10th and Patton. Let's say it takes another minute and a half for the killer to go from 10th and Patton to Patton and Jefferson. That's 2 minutes. Let's say Calloway then makes his good hard run up to the patrol car. Maybe a minute and a half, maybe. So we're talking about 3.5 minutes after he hears the shots. Calloway's at the patrol car because Calloway, after Boley, not knowing Boley had already done it, Calloway gets on the patrol car radio and he informs the dispatchers there's been a shooting. And Calloway is the one where Murray Jackson says, we've already received that information. Please remain off the air. Okay. Thing is, Calloway, his report to Murray Jackson is at 1:19.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When you put all this together, it's very clear the shooting occurred around 1:15, not before 1:10.
Right.
There's no way. There's no way. And for some reason, conspiracy advocates will not use their head and listen to reason because
Roger Craig said it was at 106.
Yeah, you want me to talk about that? so Roger Craig, real quick, is not credible. And the reason why he's not credible, there's many reasons actually, but one of the biggest reasons why is because in 1968, he was interviewed for the LA Free Press along with Penn Jones. They're giving this interview. They're talking about the Tippit shooting. Roger Craig states in this interview that the Tippit shooting occurred at 1:45. Penn Jones corrects him, says no, it was at 1:15. Roger Craig says, oh, is that right? Okay. So Roger Craig accepts the correction as the shooting occurred at 1:15. In other words, Roger Craig had no idea before giving this interview in 1968 what time the Tippit shooting occurred.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. So that's 1968. In the early 70s, Roger Craig is now writing his manuscript, When They Kill a President. In this manuscript, which he's no doubt trying to sell, he talks about how he's in Dealey Plaza and he hears a nearby radio of a police motorcycle mention the shooting of a police officer in Oak Cliff. Craig says he looks down at his watch and his watch said 1:06. Okay. So in 1968, he has no idea what time Tippit was shot, but all of a sudden in 1972, he remembers it was 1:06. Come on.
Well, his memory improved.
Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous. And that's not even talking about the fact that Craig says he saw 7.65 Mauser on the rifle, and Mauser doesn't even stamp the rifle 7.65.
Well, but he did see Oswald get into the station wagon.
Well, come on, Fred. Don't you know the only way for an assassin to escape the scene is to have a shrill whistle and jump in a station wagon as it's stuck in traffic
right at the corner for the station wagon. It's like
that's the only way to get away. It's the most logical way to get away.
And it was Ruth Payne's car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Roger Craig says that Oswald said, "Keep her out of this. She had nothing to do with this," or something like that.
So, let me ask you. I mean, we know what happened with the Tippit case, but you've been studying this for a long time. I mean, talk a bit about your experiences in debating conspiracy theorists and some of their tactics.
Okay. Well, what I've come across, the biggest tactic is to question the evidence. I think that's the single biggest thing they do. And the reason they do this is because they know the evidence points to Oswald and nobody else. And that's both for the Kennedy assassination and the Tippit shooting. Let's
Right.
talk about the Kennedy assassination for a second.
Yeah.
There were 2 fragments that were found inside the limo, Commission Exhibits 567 and 569. These 2 fragments were large enough for ballistic testing. Okay. These 2 fragments were linked to Oswald's rifle to the exclusion of any other weapon in the world.
Right.
These 2 fragments are from the headshot. So Oswald's rifle fired the shot that hit President Kennedy in the head. We can't say Oswald fired it. It's kind of ridiculous, but okay, they want to make us say that. We can't say it was Oswald. That's fine, but it was his rifle. Okay. And he did carry a package to work that morning large enough to contain a rifle. So the answer to your question, my opinion, the single biggest thing they do is they simply try to dismiss the evidence because they know what the evidence says.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be in the 1970s, well, before, when I was getting into it, but in the 60s and 70s, when people were arguing about the 26 volumes, that they would use the 26 volumes and find the little pieces of evidence that would support their theory, but they were at least using the 26 volumes. You could disagree on the interpretation, but now what they're doing is, like you said, they're just throwing out the evidence. We have to get rid of it. It's illegitimate, and so it's just the opposite of what they used to argue in the 60s and 70s.
And the thing about it is you can also use this to determine which conspiracy advocates that you're debating with on whether they want to be honest or not. Okay. Because when you have a conspiracy advocate who, so when I say, why did Oswald leave the rooming house wearing a jacket? And then he's seen by Johnny Brewer in front of Hardy's shoe stores on Jefferson with no jacket. Forget Tenth and Patton, forget JD Tippit. Why did he get rid of his jacket between the rooming house and the shoe store? When I say that, they have 2 choices. They can say, man, that's a good question. I don't know why he would have done that for. I still don't think he shot Tippit, but I don't know why he would have done that for. Let's try to deal with that. They can either take that stance, which is an honest reply,
right,
or they can take the nonsensical stance that we don't even know Oswald left in a jacket. Could have been a shirt. Earlene Roberts was blind, blah, blah, blah. So
and it's not a jacket, it's a coat.
Yes. So those who question that he even left the rooming house in the first place in a jacket, those are the ones I know that they're not being honest. They're just playing trial games. They're playing defense attorney games. They don't care, and I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to give them the pleasure, but they don't care about being truthful and honest. They just are online to play games.
Yeah, I'm in the middle right now of a discussion on Twitter with the producer of Rob Reiner's podcast series, and
he's a meathead.
Yeah, and he does not accept the autopsy X-rays and photographs because George Joannides tainted the whole HSC investigation in his view. And so once you taint the whole investigation, everything gets thrown out.
Yeah.
And so he throws out the autopsy X-rays and photos, and of course he only wants to rely upon the Parkland doctors and the blowout in the back of the head.
Yeah.
But
the autopsy photos and X-rays were authenticated by those who took them.
Yep.
And so 66 or 67, they viewed the autopsy photos and X-rays, and they said that is a accurate representation of what I saw that day.
Yeah, I even countered with the fact that John Stringer, the autopsy photographer, he wrote a book. And if you go to his book and he says the photograph of the brain, that's the brain that was removed the night of the autopsy.
Right.
And of course they can't accept the brain because the left hemisphere of JFK's brain is intact.
Perfectly intact.
And
Absolutely.
so no bullet fired from the front or the right front would have left it intact.
Absolutely.
So they have to argue that it's a fake brain. It's somebody else's brain. It's not legitimate.
Not to mention that the fragment trail was from back to front. And the church committee, all of these, the House Select Committee on Assassinations Investigation, the Rockefeller Commission, they all determined that the president was struck, as far as the head goes, only once from above and behind. Nothing about a shot from the right front, which is where the grassy knoll was.
Yeah, every single forensic pathologist has said the same thing, even Cyril Wecht. Now, Cyril Wecht eventually changed his mind, but what I find interesting about Wecht is that he never told us why he changed his mind.
Mm-hmm.
We know why he changed his mind, because it was under pressure from the other conspiracy theorists who were pissed off that he was saying the shot was from behind. But I've published letters that Wecht wrote in the 1970s to Sylvia Maher and another critic saying the left hemisphere of the brain is intact. He couldn't have been shot from the front.
Correct.
But why rely on forensic pathologists when you could go to Dr. Mantic or Dr. Aguilar, an ophthalmologist?
Right.
They know better.
But putting that aside for a second, the simple matter of those who have never been there and they want to argue how there was a shooter from behind the fence, to them, they've seen all the aftermath photos of Dealey Plaza, and they don't realize, though, that when you're up there behind that fence, the whole half of Dallas is wide open to you back there. It only looks like it's behind a fence if you're looking at it from Elm Street. Point being, what I'm trying to say is an assassin never would have chosen that location.
Right.
That would not have been something they chose. It would have been from one of the buildings, and that would have been only from above and behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as you know, Dealey Plaza is a small place. To think that there's multiple assassins firing from all these different directions, and no fragments, no shells, nothing is recovered. Anyways, it's all ridiculous.
Yeah, the only evidence recovered points to Oswald, and that's the 3 shell casings up on the 6th floor and his rifle.
And so that's why we have to argue about the chain of custody of the rifle and the order forms, and did he really order it, and the backyard photographs are, that's where this all leads to.
Yeah, regarding the order forms for the revolver used in the Tippit shooting, Cadigan and Cole, the 2 handwriting experts, testified that P.O. Box 2915 in Dallas, the application for the post office box is in Oswald's handwriting. Okay, and also the order form used for the revolver, it was ordered under the name A.J. Hiddell. That was in Oswald's handwriting. Also, there's another signature. I don't know if you know this or not. A fellow named D.F. Driddle. Now, this was a witness on the order form, because the order form had to have a witness attesting to the person trying to buy the weapon is indeed a U.S. citizen.
Right.
Okay. And is not a felon. So D.F. Driddle is this witness saying that A.J. Hiddell is a U.S. citizen and not a felon. Well, Cole said that the D.F. Driddle and Cadigan, the D.F. Driddle was also in Oswald's handwriting. So yeah, the handwriting experts basically telling you that Oswald put out the order form under the name Hiddell.
Right.
And he told Fritz that he ordered the revolver he got the revolver in Fort Worth. But we know, because of the order forms that we know Oswald wrote, he ordered from Seaport Traders in Los Angeles. And the same goes with the rifle, the same thing. So
yeah, the same goes with the rifle, and that's why they have to go through hoops to try and prove that Oswald didn't order the rifle, and the rifle was, the backyard photographs were faked. They'll do whatever they can to get rid of that rifle because it's so damning.
Do you know that, and I know you know this, but you know that when you talk about the Kennedy assassination, Oswald, there's not one person that says, oh, Lee was standing beside me. How could he have done this? He was standing beside me when the assassination happened.
Yeah.
There's not one person that says that. Now, Oswald had zero alibi. Okay. There's not one person, probably the most, like we talked about the other night, probably the most political employee in the entire school book depository building. And he's not outside watching the president of the United States come by. This guy tried to defect to Russia.
He shows no interest after it happens. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't ask.
Yep, he doesn't even ask
what happened. Whaley. Yep, he doesn't ask Whaley in the cab, and he doesn't ask Earlene Roberts, who's trying to get the TV come in to look at the news of the assassination. He doesn't ask her at all. He doesn't care because he already knows what happened.
Yeah,
he knows what happened. He saw it through the scope.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Okay, look, before we go, any last comments and thoughts about the JFK assassination? Are you looking forward to all the new documents that are going to come out once Trump is president?
It's going to be, it's there's nothing. Come on, And you know what's funny about the documents is that if there were incriminating documents, those things would have been long destroyed. So it's a moot point one way or the other anyway.
No, I know. Look, I have to laugh that RFK Jr. now wants his daughter-in-law to become head of the CIA so she could find all those documents. Boy, I hope it happens, actually, because I think he's in for a shock when he
Yeah,
finds
yeah,
out
exactly.
that
Right,
all the
right.
redactions when they're released
Right.
relate to the Cold War
Right. Exactly.
and have
Exactly.
nothing to do with the assassination.
Right. Well, RFK Jr. I mean, not to get on that subject, but it kind of is related to the Kennedy assassination in one way, because if Oswald was to come back from the grave, if Lee Harvey Oswald comes back from the grave and he goes to all these conspiracy advocates all over the world and says, "What are you guys talking about? I shot John Kennedy," they still wouldn't believe him. They still wouldn't believe him. And we know this. How do we know this? I know this for a fact. And that fact is that Sirhan, in a televised interview with Robert Frost, I think it was 88 or 89 or something
David
like that.
Frost.
David Frost. I said Robert Frost. So he's in a televised interview with David Frost. And in this interview, not only does he admit that he killed Bobby Kennedy, but he explains in complete detail his motive for doing so. Yet there are still hundreds of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people on the internet that say that Sirhan did not kill Bobby Kennedy. Yet he's telling you he did, and he's explaining why he did it.
Yeah,
so they wouldn't accept Oswald either if he were to come
back. The part
back.
is that they want him to be released. They'd want to throw him a big party if he got released. I mean, it's just completely obscene.
Right.
You know, they can't accept the fact that a communist killed Kennedy and a Palestinian Israel hater killed RFK.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly
Just
right.
can't accept that.
Yep. They want it to be the lady in the polka dot dress or something, you know.
Well, they want to be at some right winger. They want it to be a right winger who killed Kennedy and RFK because they were going to usher in a new world of peace and détente and whatever. You know, it's just all nonsense.
Regarding my last words, I would just say this, and let me think of how to say this. If you're going to believe in a conspiracy in the assassination of President Kennedy, or you're going to believe that someone besides Oswald killed JD Tippit, then if you're going to believe it, then you're going to do so without any physical evidence suggesting so. Okay? Because all of the physical evidence points only to Oswald. There's no physical evidence that points anywhere else. I'm not even talking about eyewitness testimony. We're just talking about physical evidence.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're going to believe that Kennedy was assassinated as a result of a conspiracy, or Tippit was killed by somebody other than Oswald, then you're choosing to believe so without the benefit of the physical evidence. And why would you do that?
Good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Well, look, great to talk to you, Bill. It's been a great discussion. Thanks for appearing on the Trail of Delusion. And we'll be having some panel discussions coming up. So you'll be part of our panel discussions, and that'll be a lot of fun too.
Yeah,
so thank you very much.
A panel discussion would be a lot of fun. I'd be down for that for sure.
Okay, good. So take care. I'll see you later.
All right, Fred. Yeah, thanks a lot, man.